welcome back after Easter. Bit of an audible here. It's been kind of a crazy time. I'm sure you know, but Easter was busier than I thought. So I don't have the short video just for you yet, but we will get into some of that later in this week. Today I'm recording outside, as you can see, because the baby is sleeping. She fell asleep on our walk, and this is the first time she's taken a nap all day, so it's the only time that I've had to record. So we're just going in it. A little bit shorter video today, and hopefully that'll kind of ease back into the swing of things. At the same time, just a couple updates, right? That we are about a month away, if you really think about it, like about a month away from the end of our quarter together, end of our online class together, and the end of your 8th grade year. And I know that none of us planned to end it this way. You probably know I was helping plan a trip for you guys at the end of the year to San Antonio, do some water parks, theme parks, rides from roller coasters. That's on hold for now, but hopefully we will get to that some other time. So today, here we go. We're going to try to pick it up a little bit from where we left off. Not so much in the Job story. The Job story was kind of our nice little break in the linear kind of timeline approach, the chronological approach to things. And now we're jumping back into it, right? So if you remember that David is the king of Israel, things are going great, but he's not going to build the temple. Who's going to build the temple? It's going to be his son, Solomon. And so today we're going to look at Solomon just a little bit, and then we're going to really kind of move forward because we gotta play a little catch up. You may have noticed that there's a lot left in the Bible, at least in the Old Testament, that we have not yet gotten to. So we're going to kind of speed through this a little bit, and then hopefully you guys will be all caught up and ready for 9th grade year. All right, so what's going on here? Well, if you remember, David has now made Israel into a great, strong nation. The 12 tribes, as you can see from the map and the title, are united under one banner. So 12 tribes, one kingdom. Unfortunately, right, they are names of people, the leaders of those tribes, traditionally speaking. And so some of the names, don't really line up with what you would think of as like nation names, right? Like Gad and Reuben. But you probably are familiar. Also Dan, right, if you're in the Dan tribe. But you probably remember hearing something about Judah, right? And Judah is going to be an important one to remember when we get into the end of this lecture for today. But you're going to see that there's going to be a split, right, the divided kingdom. But right now, things are going good. One kingdom, all 12 tribes united. And they're strong. They're commercially, militarily successful. Things are going really well for them. And so now Solomon has taken, his spot as king, and one of the first things that he's going to do, right, is he's going to build that temple. And so he builds it on Mount Moriah, and the description in the Bible of the temple is very exact, right? Like it's like very, very specific instructions on what the temple was supposed to be like. And the idea here is not so much that the temple is built. That's an important historical fact. It's an important fact. But it's built to God's plans and God's specifications. That's the important part. You'll notice in the Bible Project video today, that's the other meat of our easing in back into the class. You'll notice that they're going to mention the same thing, right? That Solomon, at least at the beginning, is following God's instructions. Things work out. How well did they work out? Well, for the first half of this, you'll notice they're divided into two halves here. But the first half, things work out. Solomon is known as a great and wise ruler. You probably have heard the story of the two women coming to Solomon saying they both lay claim that this child is their child. And Solomon says, I will split the child in two. That's his ruling, right? Which sounds crazy. The mothers are claiming that it's their child. His ruling is just split it in two, give each a half. And the one mother says, fine, that'll be fine, whatever you decide. And the other mother says, no, I would much rather prefer that he live and be given to the false mom than to see him killed and split into two. And then Solomon awards her the child, saying that only the true mother would put the life of the child above, getting some part of the child, I guess. Historical critics have said that this may or may not have happened. It sounds like a common folktale. But the point is that Solomon is wise. People are flocking to Solomon to hear his wisdom, And that at this point, the source of his wisdom, although a lot of it is natural, is that a lot of it is also a gift of God, right? That this is the thing that Solomon desired. He would desire true wisdom. And when he's playing by God's rules, he is known as a wise ruler. It gets his reputation for being a wise ruler gets so far that people come from all over. There's a reference to the Queen of Sheba, and then whether or not Sheba really exists or not, but his fame is spread so far for being a just and wise ruler. He's also famous for a lot of his construction projects. He builds a lot. He makes Israel not just militarily great like David, but like you could say like infrastructure, like the FDR of Israel. He has all these building projects, including, as you can see in the painting here, his throne. His throne was said to be the greatest throne of all time, at least up to that point. So things are going pretty good. Commercial success, temple builder, life's going pretty great. And what ends up happening a lot of times is when your life's going pretty good, you start attributing all that success to yourself rather than to God. And Solomon is probably the example par excellence, right? He starts thinking that all these great things that are happening to Israel, to himself, are his own doing. And because of that, that vanity hits him in a place that he was already pretty weak. And so you can see on the board there, you have got a description of his many, many wives. He is said to have over 700 wives and over 300 concubines. Whether that number is exaggerated or not, suffice it to say, not living the good, holy, married life. Now, the implication here, or you can say like the bigger thing going on, is something that we already saw happen all the way back with Cain and Abel, right? All the way back into the patriarch time. This idea that these foreigners, right, that these that idea of being a polygamist, the unwilling polygamist, that narrative comes back to haunt Solomon. So these sins that have been following Israel throughout our story are coming back, and this time with even more damaging effects. So what happens is that these wives, to appease them, to make sure that they're all happy, he starts building temples and statues to their gods from their homelands, right? And so he stops worshiping just the one God. The king of Israel, who's supposed to, be the king for Israel and Israel's God, is now building temples and shrines to other gods, right? This obviously does not go well. So there's two things going on, right? Yes, the kingdom falls apart. It falls apart because Solomon himself is falling apart, right? His interests are no longer for the good of the kingdom, they're for the good of Solomon. And anytime you see that happens, I mean, you can look at any movie, the same trope is true, right? When you stop caring about other people and you're caring only about yourself, things fall apart. Watch a documentary on the rise and fall of Kmart, and that is exactly what happened to Kmart, is that they stopped caring about the customer experience and rather cared only for their bottom line, and therefore they no longer exist. Interestingly enough, Best Buy, on the other hand, put in a lot of research and money into the customer experience, and that is why they're still one of the few brick-and-mortar stores around. So maybe things weren't as busy as I was saying. I had time to watch both those documentaries. But anyway, the theological point that's going on is this, right? You've probably seen it with those signs that there's Alabama and LSU fans in the same house, and it's the same. Abraham Lincoln said that. It's a common expression, but the idea of a house divided against itself cannot stand. And when you have the identity of Israel as God's chosen people divided against itself into these many different gods and these many different worships and these many different allegiances other than God, it cannot stand. And so the theological point is that your heart, right, your soul as well, if it's divided amongst all these varying interests, it will also fall. And so you've got those two things going on, right? On the literal sense, Solomon's kingdom is dissolving because of his selfishness and his lack of focus towards God. And at the same time, right, you can read it in the spiritual sense that the same thing can be true of your own soul, your own heart, right? Is that if it's divided against many different things besides God, it could fall apart as well. So what happens? What next? I said this would be a pretty quick one. We're kind of speeding through. There's a lot of things that do happen, right? The whole story of how it all falls apart. But basically, the kingdom becomes divided. So at the beginning, you had 12 tribes, one nation. Now you've got it split into two. And so you've got the lower division, not like JV, just in the south, you've got the two tribes, and they're known as Judah, right? And then in the north, you've got the 10 different tribes, and they are Israel. And then there's 2 different kings for each tribe. So no longer is there one united kingdom. There's 2 kingdoms with their own kings and their own interests. And what you're going to see is the next. I mean, it goes on for a while. There's this fight between the 2. This is not the plan, right? The plan was not for Israel to be divided against itself. The plan was for Israel to be the chosen people to unite all the nations together under one rule of God. So what's going on here, right? It's the message that the mission of God gets broken up when your interest and your soul gets broken up into things that are not God. So what happens next is that God says, let's put the pieces back together. And so how he's going to do it? Not kings this time, or at least not yet. He's going to do it through the prophets. And the next few chapters that we're going to look at are going to be about the prophets. And we're going to start with some of the, you can call them minor prophets. There's major prophets and minor prophets. But we're going to start with Jonah, and then we're going to get all the way up into ones that you've probably heard of, Ezekiel, Isaiah, the big one. And what we're going to try to look at is, why is it that God is using these prophets rather than the kings? You're going to notice the kings are pretty bad. And what is the role of the prophet? And then how does that help us understand who Christ is, right? Because you often hear Christ is king, especially during Easter time, which we're celebrating now. Christ is king, and it's true. Christ is a king. But he's also a prophet, and he's also a priest. So what do we make of that, right? So we've kind of looked at the king part, and now we're going to look at the prophet part. Okay? So for today, pretty easy lecture for today, pretty easy easing back into the work here. Today I want you to, if you haven't already, to watch the Bible Project video on Solomon. It'll give us kind of a recap, answer the 5 or so review questions online, and then we're going to try to have our first test, obviously not this Thursday, but the Thursday after, right? So next week, so not tomorrow, right? That wouldn't be fair, but the next week, and it'll cover everything from the last test up until that Thursday. So that's it, guys. Oh, the videos. I promise you I will get to you the videos when I get a chance. And I will see you guys in the next one.